Welcome to the valley that hope forgot.
Then Sean Hannity brought his Fox News broadcast to the middle of Westlands, made beautiful high-definition video in the sunset of the valley, and spewed the Westlands distortions and half-truths for 60 minutes. 3 months later, speaking of 60 Minutes, that once respected news magazine regurgitated the Westlands party line through the mouth of the governor. A pathetic display that only the dark overlords of Westlands, their well-paid PR masters, and their political handmaidens could love. Their posturing about the dire needs for water need to be viewed through the prism of water rights law. Westlands has what are called junior water rights. That means they are at the end of the line in dry years.
You look at what happens in the Westlands Water District when they're complaining that they only get 10% of the water that they are supposed to get. But remember, they're the most junior water rights holders in the system. The hierarchy of who gets water first. You know, if you don't have that, then you're just going to revert back to the gunslinger days where, you know, people are guarding the water hole.
If you're a grower in the Westlands Water District and you know that you're at the far end of the bucket line for public water, why are you planting orchards, permanent crops? We don't owe the Westlands Water District a living.
They claim that the notion that they have junior rights is not true.
I'm Tom Birmingham. I'm the general manager of Westlands Water District. The concept of senior versus junior water rights connotes, under California water law, connotes the principle of first in time, first in right.
What Mr. Birmingham presents as facts, Assemblyman Huffman counters that the Westlands argument is a matter of dispute.
Indeed, the date of a contract or the date on which deliveries of CVP water to a contractor commenced is not considered by reclamation when it is allocating water during periods of shortage. When an acre-foot of water is delivered from the...
Mr. Birmingham, I think you've made the point that this is very complicated stuff.
It is complicated.
And that we certainly don't want to... we don't want to raise questions with a characterization of these things that is disputed. If we're not careful, we're going to suggest that everybody on the west side got 10%. And we're going to suggest that a 10% allocation was somehow not legally expected, when in fact that's sort of the way it works under the hierarchy of prioritization and allocation, given the contracts and the legalities here.
What you've seen is a giant Ponzi scheme. It's kind of like the subprime mortgage crisis. I mean, you know, Bernie Madoff would be proud of the water rights structure in California. We promise more water that can be delivered. We've sold people on the idea that they were going to receive water, and the actual rights are predicated on surplus water that can only be delivered in the wettest of years. They have tried to firm up those rights to demand that water even when it's not available.
That's an important point, because when Westlands demand ever-increasing amounts of water, they are quick to point to laws on the books, the Endangered Species Act as an example. Westlands seems to be constantly encouraging their friends in Congress to weaken laws passed to ensure that the environment is not ravaged by those who put their self-interests above society as a whole. In the Salmon Water Now video, The Water Pirates, we ran former President Dwight David Eisenhower's cautionary words about the industrial military complex, saying that although he was speaking about the defense industry and the Pentagon, his words apply perfectly today to the California water policy discussions. Watch and listen, but think about water and Westland's insistence that their desire for water trumps all others.
We must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. And the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. You and I and our government must avoid the impulse to live only for today, plundering for our own ease and convenience the precious resources of tomorrow.
There also is no question that the imposition of restrictions by the Fish and Wildlife Service under biological opinions and by the Natural Marine Fisheries Service under the Endangered Species Act restricted our ability to move water. We have to find a better way to move the water that originates in the Sacramento River watershed to the southern part of the Delta so that it can be pumped.
More water for fish may mean less water for valley growers. The federal government now says water supplies to the valley must be reduced to save.
When reductions in water deliveries are discussed, or actually happen, they and the politicians who have been enraptured by their Westland constituents ramp up the rhetoric, including members of Congress outside of California.
It involves our food supply. It involves Westlands Water District. We cannot allow a judge or a radical environmental group to cut off water to people who are producing the nation's food supply.
Despite their insistence that modest reductions in water deliveries cause fallowed land and massive farm worker unemployment, overall, the agricultural output on the west side of the valley has been huge. Their biggest crop, tomatoes, is a glut on the market, and 75% of their second biggest crop, almonds, is shipped overseas, with the biggest chunk going to China. Now, contrast that with this reality. There is no surplus of wild salmon. It is in high demand in domestic markets, selling for around $20 a pound. When the powers that be announced that there would be a salmon season in 2010, the news was greeted with mixed emotions. Up and down the coast, newspapers told the same story. Fishing for salmon in a very big ocean is not even close to what it used to be. Westlands caused this. If they had been willing to be responsible citizens instead of heavy-handed bullies, salmon would have a fighting chance.
A federal court ruling has temporarily eased restrictions on pumping water south from the Delta. In a late-night session, a judge ruled the pumps would not harm the salmon population.
I think it's extremely significant because it also sets a precedent that you do have to look at the human environmental impacts.
The goal here is to find what the balance is, what's workable to keep a healthy ecosystem working. What Westlands represents is a non-cooperative approach to achieving or finding out what that balance is. They need to stop using political leverage. They need to stop using PR firms and big money and lawsuits to get their way and join in the dialogue about this in a productive way.
It's not too late for Westlands to redeem themselves, but recent events reveal more of the same. Recently, the State Water Control Board released a report that detailed how much water needed to flow through the Delta in order to restore the estuary back to health. What is needed to allow salmon to be brought back from the edge of extinction?
We have a fairly deep understanding of how it functions. We have a very good understanding of how it varies and how environmental conditions vary over time, both within a single day, within a year, and between years. Our objective is to create and sustain a healthy estuarine ecosystem. We believe that that is best characterized by having viable and sustainable populations of estuarine fish and wildlife species, and also having the estuary function as a safe migration corridor for anadromous fish species like salmon. We believe there is sufficient science to determine that the amount of water the estuary needs is more than it has been getting.
Predictably, the Westlands Water District's response was a pointed dismissal. Tom Birmingham's letter to the board said, "The proposed criteria would render California's water system virtually inoperable and be equally destructive to the environment and a wide range of threatened and endangered species, as they would be to the state's economy." That deficiencies in the report consist in its failure to provide the balancing and analysis required by the public trust doctrine. It is absolutely laughable for Westlands to dismiss reasonable science by arguing for balance. Balance and sharing are concepts that Westlands have consistently rejected. But for Westlands, it always seems to be that the sky is falling if they don't get their way.
That hurts! Don't do it anymore!
Are you gonna be on my side if I let you up?
Don't drain the Delta! Don't drain the Delta!
It is way past time to hold the Westlands Water District accountable for their bullying tactics. It is time for a fair and balanced water policy that addresses all affected communities in our state. It is time to put an end to the favoritism for the agriculture community that has led to devastated fishing communities. It's time to stop reducing water for fish recovery in order to accommodate those who decry water shortages in the west side of the San Joaquin Valley. It is time for Salmon Water Now.